Welcome, everyone, to Be Freaking Awesome podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we're going to talk about a topic that Angela in particular is very passionate about, which, I realize I say that this fall is just, there's not really a shortage of things that we have passion about that we're talking about. So in any case, it's not a new thing that we're going to be passionate about our topic. But today in particular, we are going to be talking about emotions and feelings. So Angela, oh yes, give us it's October, it's spooky season, it's scary. That's right. We're approaching the scary topic of feelings and emotions. I'm just kidding. Hopefully we can get to a point where it's a little less scary for people. But Angela, tell us a little bit more. Give us kind of an overview of your thoughts on this, feelings versus emotions.
Well, for starters, I would say that like 3 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought about them differently. I think in our culture, our society, number one, we're not good at talking about feelings and emotions and to begin with. And so it's very easy to just lump them in together. And so it's been fascinating to me over the last several years to really get clear on there is a difference, there is a distinction, and not to be like overly nerdy about it. But sometimes when we're learning a new skill, it's like when you learn long division, you have to spell out every step of the process so that you learn the principles really well, so that then you can do shortcuts. And so
to interrupt, you brought it up. Okay, you did this. The reason that we both sort of just giggled a little bit at the long division example is because when I was in like third or fourth grade, I come home needing help with my math homework, and I was supposed to do long division. And my dad sits down next to me and he goes, well, here's what you do. And he's showing me the shortcut. And I go, no. Our teacher said, do it this way. You're doing it wrong. And he goes, but I'm not doing it wrong. I got to the answer. Like, this isn't wrong. I'm like, but that's not how I'm supposed to do it. Anyway, big, huge fight between like
clearly
gnashing of teeth.
20 years later, still a story. And I'm sure nobody else has a math homework story about their dad that resulted in tears. Nobody.
No, not at all. So anyway, what's really funny though, the ironic moment that I will give to my dad, is that the next day our teacher was like, okay, now that you've learned the long version, now I can teach you the shortcut. And she taught us the shortcut that my dad was trying to teach me the night before that I insisted was incorrect and not an appropriate way to answer the question. So credit to him.
Cue all of the parents throughout time going, this stupid new math stuff, like constantly. I feel like every generation is like, oh my gosh, this new math. And it's like, okay, no, math hasn't changed.
Right. So there's a thing about that. Yes.
I think your gain is a little high.
Okay.
Do you want to turn it down just a smidge?
Yes, I can. Let me make sure.
Because it feels like you start talking normal and then you have to kind of back
it does
down.
Look like it's high. I can see the red. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that better?
Yep.
Better.
It's a little low. Maybe
better. I'm excited. Okay.
So,
you don't have to do it in the excited voice. Can't do it just like normal.
Yeah. No, for sure. Okay. I just wanted to let's just tweak it while we could.
Perfect.
While it was fun to re-record a podcast 3 times.
Yeah, F that. I'm going to jump back in on how long division relates to what we're talking about.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this connects, the story about the long division and the short division and whatever, so many times in our brain, when we are used to something, we do it the shortcut way. Why would I take the long way around when I know how to do the shortcut? What we are proposing today, and probably throughout a lot of this series and the book, is let's take a moment and let's go reevaluate. Let's go down the long division path, the longer route, just to make sure to check in, to make sure each of the steps still make sense. Honestly, to make sure that we're not doing things because we've always done them this way, which, is our favorite.
Really, we're countering the be efficient part of your brain. So we understand that we are asking you to fight your natural instinct to be efficient and to go fast. And we say, You can keep going fast, but if it hasn't been particularly effective, I told a client one time, I was like, you're asking me to remind you every week to pick up a 150-pound backpack and carry it and drudge through your life. And what I'm proposing to you is that we stop for a minute and take a few weeks and unpack the backpack, because then you won't have to pick it up and you won't have to remember to pick it up. So in the same sort of way, this is long-term efficient, even if it doesn't feel short-term efficient.
Exactly. So we haven't really gotten into the nuances right now. We're just sort of teeing up that we think emotions and feelings are different. And if you're listening and you're like, you guys are crazy, those are the same thing, that's a synonym. Tell us more, Angela. They're not they're not synonyms.
They're actually not. And the definition actually helps us a lot. So emotions are physiological sensations in your body. I love that Victoria Song calls them energy in motion. That helps me to remember it's just energy in my body that is happening. Ironically, emotions can be measured by a machine. So if you think about being hooked up to some monitors, a scientist, without you using words, can tell you the emotions that are happening, because they can tell you where you have sensations in your body. They can literally measure the energy that is happening. Contrast that with feelings. Feelings are the cognitive expression of the emotions in your body. So that means that scientists cannot tell you what you are feeling that without you saying words, without you communicating, because we all communicate. We can communicate our feelings with like terrible
facial expressions,
facial expressions, body language, all of those things. So we can express those feelings in ways without words, but a scientist can't tell what you're feeling. As a matter of fact, they've done research where they showed people from different cultures this person's face and then said, what are they feeling? And people guess, and they're very rarely are they guessing correctly. And so that's because the energy in motion triggers a thought, often very quickly, and that thought then creates the feeling. And what I mean by that is like we assign value. This example I use in my book is that if you, in 7th grade, were called on to answer a question and you stutter and the whole class laughs, some people would call that embarrassment, and they would decide they should not do public speaking, which is actually a secondary step. So that's a decision, and we'll talk about that later. But they would label that as embarrassment. Someone else stutters, makes the whole class laugh, and they might label that joy because they love to make people laugh. I love making people laugh. It's my favorite thing. It brings me so much joy to make people laugh. So when I say a quippy remark and everybody busts out laughing, like happiness abounds. My body is flooded with some happy sensations. And we can talk about brain chemicals sometime if we want to. That's not what we're going to talk about today. I love that feeling. And so for me, it's joyful. And it's literally the exact same thing happened. I can give you a more terrifying example.
Well, I feel like within that one, I think that there are times, as somebody who loves public speaking as well, the one to me that feels a little more comparable is the accidental laugh when I get it. When I say something that I didn't necessarily intend to draw a laugh and then everybody laughs and I'm like, oh yeah, that was funny. Like that to me feels a little more of the, like if you're thinking about it, when you say something and everybody laughs and you're like, I was serious, why is everybody laughing at me? Or you're like, you say something and everybody laughs and then you're like, oh yeah, that was funny. Like kind of that surprise moment. But there's two different labels on that. In researching for this, if public speaking, you're like, golly, there's so many feelings towards that in general. So let's stiff arm that. Holding a cat was another example. If you had a bad experience holding a cat and you got bit and you hold a cat and your heart starts to race, you might label that as fear. Whereas if you hold a cat and you love cats and your heart starts to race, you might label that as excitement. And to just rewind, I want to, you are very close to the topic, and sometimes I just want to make sure to slow it down for a second so that we don't, so that somebody's like, I still, hold on. So you're saying physiological response in our body, emotion. That could be, what are examples of physiological responses in case I'm like, I don't even know what that means.
Heart racing, palms sweating, armpit sweating, dry mouth, stomach churning.
Do you like that feeling where you're like, I just need to move a second. I feel it bubbling up in me.
Can't even breathe. Like throat closing up. All of those things that like that jolt of energy, and it may not be a jolt. Maybe it's less, sometimes when you feel love, it's like gooey caramel, that's kind of sliding all over you, that sort of feeling. So it is literally the bodily sensations.
I get tingles in my toes. There's that. I mean, it's like a little bit of like the arousal feeling, or you like feel it in your toes. It's kind of that, like that tingly. It doesn't. A lot of what you described were
negative.
It could be some unpleasant experiences.
Unpleasant. Yeah. So positive
and so positive ones are also there as well.
Like you get a phone call or an email or something about something very exciting that happened, and that like that kind of giddy feeling where it's like it could also be something in your stomach. It could be the heart racing because you're excited. It could be all sorts of things that could go on. And they're not positive or negative, actually. At this point, they are just a sensation. We often label them as uncomfortable versus comfortable.
Yes. I was like, sometimes we have different comfort levels with our body experiencing this sensation.
Yeah, which is also people that love roller coasters and I use that as an example too of like this guy said, "Oh my gosh, I hate roller coasters because my stomach gets all spinny and like my heart's racing and I hate that feeling." Or he said all those things happen when he rides roller coasters, and his wife says, "I know, isn't it great?" Right. She loves that feeling.
Right.
The sensation. Sorry, that sensation.
The sensation. Even us, this is tricky because there's still so much vernacular that these are synonyms that we have to kind of interrupt that process and that jump to it. So, okay, so physiological sensation occurs in our body.
Body sensation.
Body sensation. A sensation occurs within our body. That is an independent thing that is separate. I say separate even though time-wise, sometimes these things happen so fast it feels simultaneous.
Right.
Even though, or the interpretation of it is that it's simultaneous. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be simultaneous, and it can be something. What we are proposing is to try slow that down to say next step, labeling, assigning meaning, whatever that is a separate thing. That's I feel, this is excitement. This is joy. This is embarrassment. This is, if you've been to therapy and you've seen the feelings wheel, like that, those things are not the sensations in our body. Those things are the labels, the meaning. Sometimes it's labels. It's not always meaning, because even that, I think the label, sometimes there can be a separate step that we assigned a meaning to it. Like, I don't like to feel this way, when really you could just feel that way. Anyway, getting ahead of myself, not slowing us down like I said I was going to. Any clarification here? I just want to...
Yeah, I would say early on in this process, I kept a feeling wheel real handy for me. It's like, ooh, let's find it on the feeling wheel. Because one of my goals was in this process, as it was unfolding for me, is that I wanted to be willing to feel the entire feeling wheel. Because I also have a theory that if you are unwilling to feel sadness, grief, regret, this is not my theory, so I've learned a lot from therapy, that also limits your ability to feel joy and love, and so it just makes, I think I'm kind of as a spectrum, because the way my brain works is they're positive to negative, whereas the feeling wheel, I'm like, okay. Anyway, but I still set the goal to be willing to feel the full range of emotions, but the full range of feelings, the but what I came to see is that what I specifically want to do in this book is slow people down, teach them to notice the sensations in their body before they go to the next step of identifying the feeling and the next step of actually labeling, making meaning. So I don't have that feeling wheel anymore handy like I used to.
Well, it sort of feels like you kind of have to master step one. Maybe not master, but you need to, what we talked about with the four levels of competent, you know, being aware of your incompetence and different things like that. We're trying to move people, I think, to at least the third stage where the cognitive competence, wasn't that what it was? You are
Conscious.
conscious, not cognitive, conscious competence. It's that at least moving from you're unaware of what you don't know what you don't know to I can work on this and I can do this intentionally, which is hard because one of the hardest steps is that in between of the I know that I'm not doing this well. And that can feel really discouraging. And so it does feel like this book is how do we
Yep.
get you to that stage? And teaser, feel like subsequent books might be how do you get from here to here, from the conscious competence to unconscious competence, that mastery where it just is such second nature.
Yeah. I would say that there's an element that is in this, and specifically in this book, that I'm not sure that. So here I am learning something new or teaching something new that we haven't ever really thought about. And then I kind of want to explain the why of why we experience some of those sensations. And so I'm not sure if I'm ready to, if I can jump into that. I may be getting ahead of myself, but let's talk about panic attacks. So, when we experience these sensations, I like to think of them like a wave because they start, they come to a peak, and then if we can let them roll, they usually dissipate. Think about the times when you get startled, whether it's driving or you see a spider or whatever, if you just like, oh my goodness, huh? I got you, your heart's racy. And then if you just take a second, ooh, I need to catch my breath. And then you can just let that roll. But one of the things that happens, especially as children, is that sometimes we get activated and that sensation generates and we get to this peak and it feels super scary and super overwhelming and we don't know what to do with it. And so we just want to make it stop. So we just try and stop it like as best we can. We don't take a moment and go, ooh, I need to catch my breath. We just go, I got to stop that. And I like to imagine the metaphorical barrel where you like just push that down. I'm just going to bury that. Just stop feeling that feeling. Stop feeling that emotion, really, is what you're doing. And so one of the things that I've discovered in this process that I really got curious about after my first book, when I started having panic attacks, and I hadn't had panic attacks in 20 years, was that I couldn't figure out what was causing this this upregulation is what they would call it, this activation, this trigger, because I would just be driving down the road. I remember literally one time you and I were talking and we were talking about your job or something. And you were like, are you running? And I'm like, no, I'm not running. And you're like, you're breathing really hard. And I'm like, I'm fine, honey, I'm fine. I could not take a deep breath to save my life. And you and I were talking about nothing that should have been triggering to me. We weren't having an argument, we weren't having an upset. I wasn't telling you how things were going with my book, like nothing. It was just like, how was your day, dear? And suddenly, are you running? No. And so that's what I got curious about. And what I discovered and what I kind of theorize is that when we were kids and those emotions hit and we buried them, then we think they're gone. They're buried outside of the mind, which is a little bit like cutting a dandelion off with a weed whacker.
Or a little bit like oil companies burying toxic waste barrels and saying, no, there'll be no impact to anybody else anytime.
It will not poison the groundwater.
Certainly not.
Certainly
not going to cause cancer generations from now.
No. Yeah. There is some danger in me using the toxic waste barrels as a metaphor in this book.
I don't know that there's danger. I think there's accuracy.
Well, yes, it does. Yeah, just bring up some pretty hard facts. And I think that's kind of, I remember the day that I had therapy when I was writing this, and I came up with that, like, oh, wow, these buried emotions are a little bit like this toxic waste buried and poison the groundwater. And I was like, wait a minute. And I had therapy that day, and we got done at like, I had 10 minutes left. And she's like, okay, what else are we going to talk about? I go, can I run something by you? Like, is this psychologically sound? Have you ever heard anybody use this metaphor? And she's like, I haven't. And it's perfect because buried emotions will come up and they will cause problems eventually. May not be this week, may not be this year, it may be decades from now. And the thing is that people will like kind of say, oh, yeah, let's blame our childhood. I don't need to deal with that. I've been to therapy to get over my childhood. I said that crap. Totally said all that. But while I had gone to therapy to cognitively address the issue, I hadn't considered Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score, because that information really illustrates how if you don't let those emotions go through an entire process and clear itself out, then you still have all of this residual kind of leftover stuff. Now, some people may hear that and be like, are you telling me that every time I got upset, then I have to go back through and feel those feelings? No, because your brain is efficient. And so often what it did is I believe that what it does is to go and take those leftover feeling cycles, and my theory in the book is that it categorizes them into some core beliefs. And what I've seen is that oftentimes if we can allow ourselves to completely fully feel the feelings related to that core belief, then it often kind of releases everything, and it's sort of like taking the whole barrel out. Now, I say it takes the whole barrel out. There have been times where there may be a little residual, there may be some weeds that pop up, but it's after that first initial time, it's often you are not dealing with this huge amount of emotion because our brain's efficient. So it just puts them in these buckets, puts the toxic waste all together, lumps it together, and then we can
basically it's like trash day where you've got one thing for your trash, one for compost, one for recycling. You've got a bucket for each of these things. You can just keep shoving it in that bucket. I'm not enough, totally got a place for that. That goes in the green bucket. I don't trust myself, that one's the blue bin, like whatever it might be.
100%. That's great. That's a great analogy. Even the thinking about sorting your recycling.
Exactly.
We got the glass container. We got the plastic container. Yeah, I'm not enough. Oh, we got a bucket for that.
So
For
one
sure.
of the things in sort of prepping for this episode that I was looking into is some different, like, what are the theories of emotion? And, within science, there are a lot of things. There's some things that we have proven, and we call those laws, like, Newton's laws of physics. We go on from there. there are a lot of other things that are theories that are somebody's proposal about how something works. And then somebody says, yeah, I tried to prove that and I didn't really follow. So then I made another theory. And there are a good number of emotional theories. And I think that there's a part of this that like we just aren't, it's so intangible. There's a part of it that is hard and uncomfortable to understand and to wrap our brains around. So one, take a reassurance. If this feels like a lot for you, scientists would agree. It's sort of a lot. They can't get an alignment on how all of this works. Two, I think that there's more to come. There's more areas for us to grow and to keep learning on this and to keep open. One of the things that I found as a commonality between a lot of the theories is that there's the physiological response, that body sensation we've talked about. There's some type of meaning making. And then subsequently, there's some behavior from that. There's the doing whatever happens next. I said not really deciding, but kind of deciding. One of the theories that really intrigued me that ties back to this toxic waste barrels theory was called the Lazarus cognitive mediational theory, or just the Lazarus theory of emotion. And part of this involved an appraisal of the physiological response. So it involved some type of determination of my heart is racing. Is this good or bad? Then, based on it being good or bad, I say that very, it's like, loose terms, good or bad, that is going to help me make meaning of this. And when we have those toxic waste barrels that are so full, that gives our brain, well, when I feel this way, it's bad. And I think that there are times where when you have this sensation and when you have this feeling, it is not innately bad. I yesterday got news that I was supposed to be going on a cruise in a month, and the cruise is now canceled. And that made me sad. Me being sad is that made actually, let me take a step back, I'll slow it down. I felt the like immediate tightness in my chest, and then I felt the urge to cry. And I did start crying. I labeled that sadness and grief, and that is not bad. There is nothing wrong with that. That is a okay thing to have to happen. Interestingly, I had a couple people around me who immediately jumped to how can I make this go away? How can I make you stop feeling this feeling? How can I make this all stop? They're like, it's almost lunchtime. Do you want to go get a beer? I think there was some cake in the fridge. We can go eat cake. Do you want to like not do other things? And I was like, wow. Okay, great. The intention that you all want to care for me and that you don't like seeing me in a state where I'm not feeling what we would deem positive emotions and feelings. You guys don't want that for me. Thank you. So great. No, I'm not going to immediately.
If somebody is just listening to the audio, they missed the hard eye roll.
Yeah, I'm not going to immediately just go numb all of these things and try to shove it down and try to ignore it. I would like to just sit here and feel this for a little while. I don't think it's going to take forever. I don't think it's going to like derail me all day. And then honestly, even if it did derail me all day, I've been planning this trip for a long time. I'm very, I have,
Mhm.
I, of course I feel disappointed. Of course there is sadness. Of course I'm wanting to cry. That all makes sense. Let's let it happen. Let's not just shove it down and put it away and say, you're not allowed to be disappointed. Anyway, and so there's just all of this. You can give yourself permission to let it happen for a little bit. Now, while I will say, I do think that there is a boundary, just like I tell my 4-year-old, the expression of your emotions and feelings should not harm yourself or others or material objects around you. Let's find ways to avoid causing harm within our experiences. So, no, I'm not going to punch you, even though Henry this morning told me, I want a smoothie so bad. If you don't give it to me, I'm going to punch you. And I said, that is a big feeling that you're feeling if you want to hit somebody so bad because you can't have a smoothie. You can't hit somebody. You can go hit a pillow if you want. That all makes sense. I got derailed because then I'm now thinking about Henry and the stupid smoothie.
No, no, no. But what I was going to say is I have a really good quote. My first thing was that your theory of Lazarus was like, oh, I don't know who came up with that theory, but Gandhi said your beliefs create your thoughts create your feelings create your action's what changes the world. And I think that he was missed a step because the
you think
sensations
Gandhi was
actually
wrong. Let's call it
happen.
what it is.
No, I don't think he was wrong. I think he just there's a nuance. And like you said, think about we've only learned so much about emotions in the last 30 years, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so that was one thing is that and it's the I mean, that is 100% how I thought of things for a long, long, long time before I understood this like sensation. There is a quote and I would attribute it if I knew where it came from, but it is basically you can't control your first sensation. Like your body gonna do what your body gonna do. But you absolutely have responsibility for your response and your behavior. And that's what I love about what you're teaching Henry here is that like when we get activated and we have that sensation racing through our body, you can't control that any more than I could have controlled those panic attacks or and telling myself that I it was bad that I was having panic attacks. Promise you was not helping because I was telling myself, oh my gosh, in your book, you say address the fears. You cannot be having panic attacks because if you have panic attacks, then you must be a fraud. You must not know what you're talking about. Blah, 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 blah. That's all the thoughts that went along with my panic attacks. Now, if I had a panic attack, what I would be is like, okay, I notice that my chest it's constricted. I can't take a breath. I want to cry. I would walk myself through that ideal world, you know. And I'm tired and stressed
For
and
sure.
hungry. Like sometimes those sensations still overwhelm me. I think that's part of being
Well, and I
human.
will say
That is part of being
there are
human.
times where when the sensation overwhelms me, I don't want to add overwhelm or add to the thing with all of the extra thoughts. And so, like, one of the tips that Ashlyn, who was on the podcast earlier this year, that she taught me whenever I'm feeling a panic attack, find something really solid and lean against it. And just notice how solid it
Mhm,
is. When I feel like a
mhm.
turmoil tornado going around in me, I'm going to lean against a wall. I'm going to press my cheek to the wall to see how does this feel against my cheek. And I say feel in that like the molecules of my cheek up against the wall. um
And I will say that sometimes people will express to me, well, what if I'm in a meeting and I can't go stand up against the wall? No, but you can stop and notice. I say walk through your five senses. What are you smelling? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Can you feel how solid the chair is? If you're standing when your panic attack hits or you get activated, how solid is the ground that you're on? Notice the ground that you're on. Notice what is happening because when we can kind of give our brain a minute to like the sensations overwhelming us, it takes a second for the prefrontal cortex to be like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, this is just triggering a danger response from a previous incident. We're not actually in danger. Hang on, slow down, slow down, slow down. We can go back to homeostasis
right.
now.
Or even get to a point where you can more naturally and easily say, okay, something is happening in my body, I need to let this go, I need to let this happen. Like, even
Yeah.
that, because the resistance to things, I think the resistance also makes it a
Yes.
lot worse, which we probably put a
Worst.
pin in that for a
Oh
later
my.
full podcast episode about
For
just resistance. Um, but that is when you fight it, you kind of make it worse.
oh, my favorite image of that, and I was coaching earlier and I said, like if you are drowning and the lifeguard tries to grab hold of you so many times, the most dangerous thing is for you to flail about and try to like hit the lifeguard. And we're doing it to try to be safe. And I've heard stories, or maybe it's just been on TV, but like the most important thing is for the lifeguard to get you to like stop reacting. And they, even if they have to knock you out for a second so that you will stop reacting. But that resistance is what is actually more
Yes.
dangerous in that scenario than just, okay, I'm going to relax and let the lifeguard catch me, you know, not relax and not try to swim, but in that moment, the resistance,
But even that's when
absolutely.
you're having a panic attack, that resistance to the panic attack can sometimes cause it to escalate. That was for me when I was having panic attacks. When I hit the point that I could allow them and embrace them, and it was like, okay, panic attack is coming. I'll like, okay, great. We'll go panic for a moment. And then suddenly, like, all the power was gone. And it was like,
Yeah.
never mind. There's nothing here to panic about. Like, as soon as you gave it permission, which is also something that I'm finding with Henry, when I give him permission to hit something, suddenly that need to hit is actually gone. Um,
Right, because we're all rebellious.
right.
I thought what you were going to share on from Ashlyn was the idea of don't have feelings about your feelings, because often we bring in the word should. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And so we start shoulding all over ourselves and like I shouldn't be having a panic attack. But when you allowed it, okay, you didn't have feelings. You didn't think you were flawed. I'm damaged. I'm broken. Blah, 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 blah. All the crap that our inner critic is doing to try to keep us safe in there, to our detriment, not to our advantage. They are keeping us safe. We are surviving. But I propose if you're listening to this podcast, you're tired of surviving and you want to do a little bit more than survive, which is I think what we're trying to say is sometimes you got to allow it, and you have to have
Mhm.
capacity really to allow it, right? You have to have the ability to step out of a meeting or to even be able to say to your coworkers, look, we share an office, we're in an open office concept, so I'm sorry that you're uncomfortable, that I need to feel this feelings, but I don't have a place I can go because it's way less safe for me to walk through the rest of the office building to go to the bathroom while I'm bawling my eyes out. So can I just be safe right here with you guys? And not everybody has that. I understand. Sometimes we have to kind of like we do have to suck it up buttercup until we can get to the bathroom and then
I
let it
like how
out.
you just again uh, made an anonymous story that was one about me because that was me this week crying in an open office, reassuring my coworkers that they could just let me cry because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I also
You just shared that
did I
story
just share?
about the
Oh yeah, but I
disappointment.
didn't tell them that I wasn't willing to go to the bathroom to go cry.
Oh, well, I assumed that about your open office scenario. So, the because some I just imagine people sitting there going, "I'm not going to sit at my desk and cry. That'll just be weird."
It's brave.
And it's like, yeah,
It might be weird, but it's
it is
brave.
brave.
And it is a way to model how you can feel things and express emotion. I also think that there you could use strategic bottling is sometimes what I would call it. There's a difference between bottling your feelings and emotions and strategic bottling. So it's that I'm at Thanksgiving dinner with my in-laws and I am gonna shove it down for a moment. And then would you excuse me? I'm gonna go take a nap now. And then you can have that moment where you call your mom and say, ah, everything is crazy. Anyway, whatever that is, or like that strategic bottling, it's the coming back later. It's if you are not in a space that is safe. I also think that you can start trying to create spaces where you can practice this, whether it's with a trusted friend, whether it's with a coach, whether it's with somebody that you can metaphorically or physically hold your hand while you're going through this intense sensation. Somebody who can maybe help you, like, there's a steadying point on the horizon that this person can help be for you while you're feeling the turmoil.
They can be the wall
The
that you
wall
lean
that you lean
against.
against,
But
because the more you get that practice in sort of the safe space, I think about like that's sometimes that's the benefit of going to therapy is that I get to go to a place where inside this room it is a safer space for me than out in the world. That gives me a chance to practice skills. That gives me a chance to get better at this so that then I can add in the extra stimulus of the world as a at large and be
Mhm.
able to exercise these skills. And that's something that me being able to cry in front of my coworkers happened because I have done a lot of work to practice expressing this emotion in safe spaces that now I'm able to create my own safe space in an otherwise not neutral space.
Sure. I think the other thing that holds people back from actually allowing themselves to feel the sensations and letting that wave return to homeostasis is they're afraid if they ever start crying. And I say this cuz I felt this way. If I ever start crying, I won't be able to stop. And I can tell you that one time in my life I cried most of 2 weeks. And I call that my nervous breakdown because I couldn't shower during that time. I couldn't, I mean, it was, and when you have a 4-year-old and a 9-month old, it's pretty detrimental to not be able to get out of bed, not to be able to do all of those things. And so, and that was an extreme. That was before I'd done very much therapy. And if you've been through traumatic experience, I'm going to reassure you again that therapy is a fantastic option because it will help you learn how to develop these skills, as Amy just said. The other thing, though, is that most of the time, it doesn't take that long for that wave to complete and go back to homeostasis. I joked last night that it was like, give it 18 minutes. There's actually an Apple TV show called Shrinking, and Harrison Ford is a therapist on there, which is friggin' hilarious. And he has a theory that he hates grief. You got to do it. It sucks to not do it. And so what he says is when you're trying to practice grief, then you should go and set a timer for 15 minutes, put on some very sad music, and let yourself cry and trash about and feel your feelings. And then when the timer goes off, wash your face and go back to your life. And it's shocking how there's just 15 minutes and I say 18 minutes because I've been able to complete that cycle in 12 minutes, with some practice. And so I think some of it is that if you've got these feelings bottled up and you've never ever ever let them out and let yourself experience the sensations fully, it can be terrifying to start. Which I think is what our coaching practice is revolves around, is actually people being able to sit with us while we walk them through
Mhm.
that. It's interesting, the last couple of coaching calls I've had have been pretty intense, and both of them have been with people that one of them was a referral, so I knew them none, zero, when I started the coaching appointment. The other one, I think I'd known the person like 2 hours. 2 meetings. I one meeting I'd sat in with them, and one meeting we'd had a coffee date, and then here I'm coaching. So, and those happen to be the most intense. And I was able to say to them, I promise you, I can walk you through this. Relax into the sensations, relax into this. And it was such an interesting sensation for my body because 2 years ago I was just understanding the idea of grief and feelings, and now to have coached enough people through this that I feel very confident that I could walk them through this. And I promise we will get to the other side. I promise the sensation of throwing up or that someone is choking you, I promise it will reside. It does. And anyway, but most of us are too afraid to even wade in that first time, which is understandable. I was.
And yet, we also still think that it's important and going to make your life
We
so
do.
much better.
So much better. That's the whole point of all of this, is that I want people to live free from the inner critic that's constantly dishing crap in their head. I want people to be able to safely experience the sensations. I want them to stop walking around with the belief that I'm not enough and I'm not lovable. I mean, it is crippling people and crippling in their jobs, in their businesses, in their families. I mean, it is, I just am so passionate about this because I know what kind of freedom that I've gotten. And for 20 years, I believed your thoughts create your feelings. So just pick a new thought. It's all about positive thinking. It is not all about positive thinking. You, especially those of us, well, and remember, trauma is anything that happened that we can't make sense of. And so my theory I lay out in this book is that childhood was traumatic. So you just gotta like reconcile those things that we decided as children.
I feel like that's a good as place to end as any. So very deep stuff, kind of hard. I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like, we're not saying that this is easy to interrupt that process. It is something that takes practice. It's sort of like going to the gym. You can't go bench press 200 pounds day one. Sometimes you gotta just bench the bar and go with that. We do have a workshop coming up if you want to learn a little bit more about positive thinking and why it's not necessarily enough. That's literally the name of the workshop, is why positive thinking isn't enough. So we are going to be digging in deeper. You're going to have a chance to ask more questions. You can go to the website, Be Freaking Awesome. That's the letter B, freakingawesome.com, or you can go to angelabelford.com and sign up will be there. It'll be on Tuesday, October 24th. And otherwise, if you're not going to the workshop, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening and for liking and for sharing. And we love all of you guys. We're so grateful for you. And I hope you guys go be